Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Football Daily Digest podcast. It's that time of week again where we dissect and digest the happenings of the last week or so, and look forward also to this weekend's fixtures. Joining me this week, as per usual, the gang's all here in illustrious company of Andy Dunn, Chief Sports Writer of the Daily Mirror, Jeremy Cross, Chief Sports Writer of the Daily Star, and Matt Dunn, football aficionado of the Daily Express. Guys, it's been a busy week, isn't it? So we'll reflect upon England, the end of the Nations League campaign. What did we learn? We learned that Phil Foden's going to be a bit special, didn't we? Certainly. And also looking forward, I think, to this weekend's games. Got some really special fixtures coming up. Tottenham, Man City, Tottenham, the real deal. We'll be asking that. We'll probably find out a little bit more about that against Man City. And then also a really eye-catching game. Liverpool facing so many problems and so many obstacles right now against Leicester on Sunday. So that will be a fascinating game. But I'm actually going to kick off, guys, with just the fallout from England, really. I mean, most of us were at the game last night. What do we think of the performance and the international camp overall? It's taken a lot of battering, Andy, hasn't it? Really, over the last couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, it has. It's taken a battering. This always happens, and even more so now when people see the physical struggles of the players are having during this season because of the pandemic reasons and the fixture logjam. So people are inclined to sort of say, well, what's the point of these internationals? Particularly as obviously last night was essentially a dead rubber. And also, in particular, the friendly that we have at the start of these three games, people say, what's the point? Well, we know what the point is. It's to fulfill TV contracts. The FA needs money as well. But at the end of it, when it's all said and done, I think Gareth Southgate and I think we can all say it was a very, very worthwhile international break. For a start off, Jack Grealish went into this international break essentially still on trial in Gareth Southgate's eyes. You sense that he still wasn't totally convinced. He's come out of these three games. He started all three, and he's come out of now as maybe England's most important player. Certainly the player that you can't imagine not being in the starting 11. We know that Phil Foden's now a talent. We've seen Harry Maguire sort of settle back down in the two games that he played. So it's been very, very worthwhile for Southgate. And, if you take them just at what they are, which is stepping stones and building blocks towards Euro 2020 in 21, then they are worthwhile. Gareth Southgate will have learned things. He will have learned that maybe Mason Mount and Grealish can play in the same team. He can probably learn that, I say the Foden, he already knew, is a supreme talent that he has got to somehow get into that side for 2020. He will also have learned that, I don't know, he will go away, I think, and look, is this still the way forward, this 3-4-3 formation? So I just think that if we take them for what they are, which is stage and post towards the ultimate aim, which is success at Euro 2020, then they've been very worthwhile.
Do you know what, Jezza? I keep on hearing the same people that are championing Jack Grealish and saying what an amazing talent he is. You can tell why I've come to you on this question, Jez, haven't you? But basically, are the same ones saying that internationals are absolutely pointless. International friendlies are an absolute waste of time. I thought, Andy, I think, raised it the other day as well. If international friendlies and internationals are that pointless, how come we promoted Jack Grealish and also indeed Conor Cody, who I think is arguably in my Euro starting 11 now? Do you get the point I mean? There's so much negativity. I love the fact the other day, I think Gareth put away a journalist the other day asking about, kind of what does it all mean? Does it really matter? And I just love the way he put him away, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, look, this argument about international friendlies is it's strong at the minute for those who championing against it because of the current circumstances with the COVID. Obviously players are struggling with injuries, like Dunny referred to. We've just played an extra game, so we've played 3 games instead of 2. And people will argue, is it necessary? Maybe could England have had a training camp instead of playing the Republic of Ireland? They had to fulfil last night's game, obviously, because it was a Nations League game, even though there was nothing at stake. But yeah, you're totally right. Look, Southgate's learned so much about Grealish in particular, who Dunny's referred to earlier. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we now know he is a wonderful player at international level who can produce the same form for England that he can for Villa. So that's a huge plus for Southgate. And look, yeah, we all know players are under a lot of pressure. They're being used as pieces of meat, you know, really, in the current climate. But playing for your country is the ultimate accolade. And, you know, the Euros are 7-8 months away. So this has been such an important 2 weeks for Southgate in terms of his preparation. And, you know, look, he put away a journalist on that subject. And he's also, you know, I think he proved last night that he's stuck two fingers up to the club managers who have clearly been leaning on him to rest players or give players less game time. Harry Kane for one, because, you know, he named a strong side last night. And I just looked at as soon as I saw the sideline, I thought that's Southgate making a point to people like Mourinho who clearly want Kane to be, you know, rested for last night. He played 75 minutes, 76 minutes. So, you know, good on Southgate. He's got his job is to win a major tournament for England. And, you know, he has to be selfish. And I'm glad he was last night.
Yeah. Matt, I think you were on correct me if I'm wrong, but you were on the kind of the press conference Zoom call that we get in you know, streamed into our laptops in the Wembley press box, weren't you?
I wasn't on the live one.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
No, I missed that.
I actually thought he had some very interesting points to make, Gareth, on basically on the on kind of September internationals not taking, you know, shouldn't have taken place. Frustrations over testing, lack of staff testing. You know, basically, hopefully, be in better shape by March. But he was again sort of kind of referring to this new generation. It feels like a passing moment in time. Obviously, full of praise for Phil Foden. Does it feel like that this team is evolving, Matt, ahead of the Euros?
Oh, of course it does. You know, I'm sitting down today and looking at what team we might have sent to the Euros just last summer and what team we're likely to send next summer. And it's a world of difference. It's like you say, Phil Foden hadn't played for England at the time when Euro 2020 should have taken place. Jack Grealish, likewise. And these are now key players. Other fringe players like Saka hadn't figured. As Southgate himself mentioned, 10 debutants this autumn. And you know what happened to the World Cup squad of 2018. There's a few stalwarts still there. Pickford, Maguire, Dyer, Kane, but around them, you know, it's a bunch of youngsters, and that bodes well for the future. I mean, it does. It's constantly been evolving.
Trippier as well.
Trippier, of course, yes.
You know, but went and came back again. Yeah, exactly. You know what? You mentioned all those youngsters, and I'm just sitting down now, going to write a column for tomorrow, and the phrase "I can't get away from it." I can't get away from it. It's been, we keep doing it, and I'm going to do it again. The golden generation. It's just you can't get away. I keep thinking, no, don't use that phrase. Don't ever use that phrase again. But you just can't get away from it.
Come on, tell us who's the golden generation? Because everyone knows the previous one, but who's the golden generation?
Oh, this golden generation was on display last night. This golden generation is Phil Foden. It's Mason Mount. It's, although he's a little bit older than those guys, Jack Grealish. It's Bukayo Saka. You know, it's Mason Greenwood. You know, we're forgetting that he wasn't in the squad, and he's seen as one of the brightest talents. Yeah. It's Marcus Rashford, who's almost a senior statesman of the golden generation. You know, I just think it's incredibly exciting, and you know, you think to yourself, well, no, look, you know, let's get carried away, because after all, don't forget, we did only finish third in our Nations League group behind Belgium and Denmark. You know, and you know, it was Iceland. It was 10-man Iceland in the end. And with 11 men, they weren't very good. With 10 men, they were desperate. So, you know, yes, I keep the voice in the back of the head keeps saying, don't get carried away. But listen, if you can't get carried away watching players of the talent of Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, and Mason Mount, and Saka, then what are you in the business for?
The interesting thing will be, Crossy, obviously we don't see them play again until March when the World Cup qualifiers start, which is a really weird scenario, given that they're World Cup qualifiers before a European Championship. So Southgate will have to play his strongest team that he thinks is his strongest team in March, which could be a good thing in a way, because you'll maybe see what he's thinking is for the Euros. But the problem he's got between now and next summer is, especially in attack or in those attacking front third of the positions, what formula does he go with? Who does he pick? Because you've got Sterling, you don't even mention Sterling, who's a nailed-on starter for me if he's fit. You've got Rashford, you've got Grealish, you've got Harry Kane, you've got Jadon Sancho. We didn't mention him. Yeah. He's not been in great form, granted, but we all know he's going to be a worldie. What does he do?
But the key in there, Jez, is it's the phrase you mentioned. If he's fit, I mean, we're not making a song and dance about it because it is only Iceland and it's a dead rubber. But as it stands, I think 9 of what would be Southgate's squad for Euro 2020 are injured or unavailable to him. That's nearly half a squad. I mean, that's how ridiculous the situation is with all the injuries that are going on and the COVID situation. And he knows that in March, he's going to have to pick the best team that are available to him. And that's what's exciting about this England squad at the moment, is it's got a lot more depth. So if we do miss a few key players, we've now got a plan B. We've got players who can step in and actually still do a job. And other countries, we always seem to think it's just the Premier League are getting injuries. Presumably, they get injuries abroad as well, even with their 5 substitutes. Other countries are going to be in that situation. And you start scratching below the surface of that Belgium team, for instance, and there isn't a great deal of strength in depth. And I think going into a Euros at the end of a long season that we've had all across the continent, I think we're in pretty good shape.
And Andy, I think down the last 20 years or so, particularly sort of a tip of that really to the legendary and wonderful and late Brian Woolnough, really used to sit at the front of every press conference building up to every major tournament and ask 6 or 7 different England managers down the years, is it time to deliver?
Yes.
It became such a cliched old question, didn't it? And one we used to laugh with Wooly about. But that's the issue, isn't it? You can only have so many excuses about injuries when you're hosting and when you're hyping up the Euros. But also, why will it be different? Do you think for this particular golden generation to the one of of the mid noughties?
I just get the feeling with this generation, you see speaking to we spoke on Zoom last night to Bukayo Saka, and the confidence these guys have without it being arrogance is incredible. I find listen, Phil Foden and Mason Greenwood had their indiscretion in Reykjavik, but I find their attitude, this generation's attitude, typified by Saka, certainly typified by Mason Mount, to be incredibly mature. They're very, very confident boys, very, very confident without being arrogant. They believe in their own ability. That is, and they seem to have a work ethic that is second to none. I just like everything about them. I just like the way they seem to have been. And this is where I think the academy system does its job. It's where I think St George's Park, for those who've come through that system, where that's done its job. I think we're rearing very good all-round footballers and characters, and that's what these guys strike me as. Don't forget they a couple of them have also had success at junior level. Phil Foden scored a goal in a World Cup final at under 17 level. So, these guys know what it's about. I am just impressed all round with their maturity. And as for injuries, listen, there's a few injuries this time around, but it's nothing. Rashford will soon be back. Sterling won't be far off. Ward-Prowse that was missing from this squad, he'll probably play at the weekend. I don't think it's I do think there's a temptation to get doom and gloom about injuries before they even happen. You will get. There's no reason that English players should be any different from any other country's players. There will be injuries. There's probably an average, isn't it? There'll probably be 2 or 3. Maybe if you're unlucky, maybe 2 automatic choices missing through injury, and then the rest of them, you think, well, they might be injured, but they might not have been in the squad anyway. So I wouldn't get too concerned about that at all. No,
Jezzo, I think Saka is a really interesting case in point, isn't he? Because if you look at it, I'll be honest, I'm still not quite sure whether about him as a left wing back. But as Narf sees the opportunity, he's super. Please don't get me wrong, he's super going forward. His stats are remarkable. and his decision making, his maturity on the pitch is fantastic. But he's just one of those. I don't think anyone would put him in there. Kind of, a couple of months ago would put him in a potential starting 11 for the Euros. But what an example to absolutely everyone. About how you can seize an opportunity.
Yeah, look, he's. You've obviously seen him play for Arsenal more than I have, but he reminds me a bit of Ashley Cole. Actually, I remember first seeing Ashley Cole. I think he played for Arsenal at Bradford. It was one of his first ever games when Bradford were in the Premier League. Obviously, they're going back a long time now, but he's just one of those players where you just saw Cole play that day and you thought this kid's going to be a really special player, and that you get the same feeling. Saka, he's very confident. He sort of plays with this sort of stature that he shouldn't really have at his tender age, and nothing seems to faze him. I mean, not too long ago, players of that age, if they did get called up by England, they'd freeze. They'd absolutely look scared to death. But I think a lot of credit has to go to Southgate. He's changed the culture of the England team. Players are a lot more outspoken, confident in themselves, express themselves more. And Saka's a reflection of that culture that Southgate has sort of embedded in the squad since he became the manager 4 years ago. So, look, Saka's going to be a great player, and he's got a great opportunity, really, because there's only Chilwell, really, between him and, nailing down that place on the left, whatever role that might be. But he's got, obviously, the great engine to be a wing-back if Southgate wants him to play in that role. So, I'd be very surprised if he's only going to get better as well, and with experience and age. So he's virtually got his place in the squad already, I think, for next summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, looking over all at this latest international camp, we have now obviously got this date in the diary, England-Scotland, on the back of this. I mean, how special will that be? It's been mixed fortunes, isn't it, for the other home nations in the sort of the Nations League as well. But that England-Scotland game is going to be really something, isn't it?
Oh, please, God, let there be fans in there, because I think that's what's going to make it special. Though that's the disappointment you hear from Welsh fans about the recent friendly, is it just didn't feel like an occasion behind closed doors. So let's all pray that fans come down in enough numbers to make Wembley, resound to the noise of excitement again, rather than just hollow shouts and a few choice language, a bit of choice language. But yeah, it's always the same for whatever reason. From the 2-2 draw recently, back to Gaza's goal, there's always something about that game. And I think it just makes Euro 2020 even more mouth-watering for the delay that we've had to get there.
Andy, are we getting carried away with ourselves to say that England should be really red-hot favourites for this?
For that particular game?
Yeah.
Oh, no, they should be favourites. They should be hot favourites to that particular game. I mean, there's just, there's no getting away from that. You look at the personnel available to Gareth Southgate and the personnel available to Steve Clarke. And, there is a gap. But that's a gap that can be bridged by, and Scotland have done it before, by sheer endeavour, by determination, by spirit. And they have got good players, and they have shown marked improvements under Clarke. It was a poor result, obviously, last night. And a shame they couldn't get into that top tier of the Nations League. But, I don't think we're going to see the Nations League now, are we, until 2022 now? I think it's June 2022 we start again with that. So yes, they can bridge that gap. But clearly on paper, strip away the emotions of the game and the history of the game and the hype of the game, strip that away. And England's current squad should be able to beat, Scotland's squad. They will be huge odds-on favourites and deservedly so. And that's the way they will look at it. They'll also be very familiar with their opposition. And at Wembley, you strip it all away, and you'd have to think that England will be looking at that to be thinking, well, if we don't get 3 points in that game, then that's going to be an opportunity that we've let slip through our grasp.
Yeah. Tell you what, Crossy, just to add to that, Scotland's best hope might be, ironically, if fans are allowed back into Wembley, because although it sounds crazy because it's at Wembley and England would have the majority of support, you just imagine if Scotland played England at Wembley in front of a full house. Obviously won't be a full house, but if it did, it'd be. I think it'd be a leveler, and it'd be a lot closer to core. But behind closed doors, you'd fancy England to win that quite comfortably.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Matt, one of the knock-on effects and big discussion points, I mean, it's relevant to the international camp and also looking ahead to this weekend, has been while while we've had the internationals, the raft and the increase of positive coronavirus cases has been alarming, hasn't it? Really, we've seen big names. Salah, failed a couple of tests. He's still in Egypt, not able to fly home. El Neni for Arsenal. Various names. Matt Doherty for Spurs out of this weekend's game. There's been, so many, a record high, weekly high in Premier League terms, and that doesn't even include the internationals. How concerned should we be? And do you think it is, purely and simply down to the internationals?
Oh, no, I don't. Well, partly it's internationals because you're coming into contact with different people and different protocols. And I mean, it was interesting Southgate paying such tribute to his staff about how they've managed to keep themselves healthy. But there is an element of fortune involved in it because you can't control every aspect of your life. It's called a pandemic because it affects us all. It's all around the world at the moment. It's in every corner of society. You can just be unlucky. You can be as careful as you can, but but when it's pervading those tight bubbles that the Premier League players have set up and the Premier League clubs have set up around themselves, you realise just how dangerous this disease is. Football's ploughing on regardless. There doesn't seem to be any complaints about the randomness of missing various players because we all accept that we're in a situation that's completely artificial. But I mean, it is just a dose of reality when we're stuck in those bubbles that remind you that these are difficult and different times. We keep ploughing on in the hope that the coronavirus doesn't get a bigger grip anymore, and it remains sort of 16 failed tests domestically while everyone was away, and doesn't start climbing any higher than that.
I don't think going to your brother's wedding there with 800 guests is the most sensible thing to do in the current climate, do you?
No.
That's the power I'm referring to, obviously.
It does make you question, Jezza, though, doesn't it? It does make you question kind of, we've got these different protocols. We've got these different, dare I say it, standards. And I don't want to sort of kind of sound, in any way disparaging about, but, Egypt has got 7 days isolation compared to our 10, for elite sport. So, when you've got different protocols, you've got dangers, haven't you, in there? You've got dangers with the travel, of course, quite apart from that.
That's the issue.
Training facility.
Johnny said, isn't it? You get in teams coming together in their own separate bubbles, but mixing with playing against other teams that have come from a different part of the world. So, listen, how do you police that? I mean, you either say, right, there's going to be no international football for obvious reasons, just to play it really safe, or you take that risk, and that's what the authorities have chosen to do. So, you've had games played all over the world. You've had Cristiano Ronaldo miss loads of games because he got the COVID. No one escapes it. I just think that some players, do players swap shirts after the game? I saw Phil Foden last night. An Icelandic player went up to him and asked for his shirt, and he basically brushed him off as if to say, no, mate, I'm not swapping shirts. I mean, I'm thinking, well, fair play to you, because that's the last thing you want to do, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
but, just the little things you forget about that all contribute to this unholy mess that we've been in and still find ourselves in.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was noticeable. I mean, sort of Gareth Bale was talking about it this week, wasn't he? Yeah. And kind of Gareth Bale was talking about his sort of fears, having sort of kind of come into contact with Matt Doherty, of course. And there's that picture of them sort of in an embrace. I mean, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? It's
like a big chain, isn't it? Yeah. We're all linked together by this evil virus in one way or another, and footballers are right at the forefront of it.
Yeah.
John, I think what's remarkable, and I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, is the way the football is just determined to plough on regardless. Every competition is getting played in its entirety. Lower league teams are still playing in the what's it called now? The Football League trophy. Is it the Papa John's trophy?
Papa John's, yes.
The Papa John's trophy is going ahead. It's everything is just ploughing on.
Fresh ingredients.
And they
just want a piece of the action, though, don't he? So.
I'll set them up, lads. You just Anyway,
we don't get 3 pieces out of this, lads. Come on.
I'm trying desperately to think what, but
other pieces are available.
But it's a domino effect. But the thing is, And they are just determined to plough on, with every single competition. That includes international competition, European competition, domestic competitions. So it's going to happen. It's going. You're going to get more positive tests. That's just that's just what's going to happen. We know it increases. As with the onset of winter. So and footballers are no different from us. From a man and woman in the street. So we're going to see that. It's just a question if football continues just to say, right, okay, well, we're just carrying on. And if you've got it and you have to isolate and miss games, then toughen it. And if you happen to have 5 or 6 players that have got it, then you just got to crack on. It's as simple as that. And that's why I don't think you get anyone complaining about the situation, because it's just going to be, an element of fortune to it on how badly they are affected by it.
Yeah, I do think it highlights the fact, Jose, doesn't it? The Project Restart and indeed the Premier League this season has done incredibly well, as Andy there says before. I mean, it's just, it's a remarkable triumph in many ways, isn't it? And it's only because we've broken the bubble, if you like, a little bit.
Yeah, look, there's been setbacks. There's no questioning that, but there have been minor ones in the whole scheme of things. So football's led the way, really. I mean, since June, when it came back, it gave the nation a lift, didn't it? We all loved having the games back, albeit behind closed doors without fans. And you have to say it has been a huge success. Obviously there is an impact. We've seen players getting injured, and that is probably related to the circumstances of the season and the COVID and everything. But that's what people argue. That's probably a small price to pay for being able to watch 2 or 3 games of football a week. So, and I would probably agree with that, really.
Just quickly, sorry, John, if I could just interject there, just a point there that catches my attention is has anyone actually seen this business about the injuries? Mm-hmm. Has anyone seen a study to definitively say there are more injuries now after 8 games of a Premier League season or whatever it is compared to previous seasons? To me, at the moment, it just seems like anecdotal. Someone gets injured, or that's because they're playing too many games. I don't know.
There's a report that isn't there. There's an increase in muscular injuries.
40%.
There has been in the early thing, something like that.
Yeah. There is actually a definitive study that says yes, there are more injuries this season.
I think they reckon that they have plotted more injuries than you'd expect.
Right. You've also got to take into account there's the COVID. Players are missing because of COVID. I mean, obviously, Salah. I know it's a slight different from the injury situation, but there are players missing because of COVID. Like Salah's now going to miss 3 games. Doherty probably the same. Elneny as well. So while ever COVID's still on the planet, you're always going to have that issue. Yeah,
it does raise the question. And listen, there was a Premier League managers meeting yesterday, and it's firmly back on the agenda. I mean, the managers I think are overwhelmingly in favour of the 5 subs across the 20 teams. But that doesn't necessarily mean the hierarchies, of their
it's a club decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's got to come back to that. But also, should we midway through, whenever it might be, when it's back on the agenda and if it's voted on again, should we reintroduce a system which fundamentally changes the game midway through the course of a campaign?
No, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think we should be blind to the fact that if it is dangerous to players, you do need to protect them as a number one priority. But it does go against the whole idea of fair play, integrity of the competition, everything else. And I just hate the fact that it changes the game into a squad game where you start by fielding reduced teams and then improve it as necessary, depending on how way the score goes. It's just a different way of approaching the game, and it's wrong.
That's exactly that. So it's totally it's disingenuous for managers to say, well, it's for the physical safety of the players, and that's all they keep saying. When Tottenham Hotspur were 1-0 down against Royal Antwerp at half-time, did Jose Mourinho put on 4 players in one go because he was worried about the physical safety and well-being of his players? No, he put on 4 players because the 10 outfield players out there had stunk the place out in the first half. An international team did it the other day. I can't remember who it was. It was I think it was Colombia. I think Carlos Queiroz, who's manager of Colombia, changed 4 and 1. It's only a matter of time if it comes back in before some smart aleck puts all 5 on in one go. Imagine someone like Manchester City with the sort of benches that you see them have, put on 5 attacking players in one hit. You put on a special team. It's American football. And that's the thing. If you could turn around and say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll get this 5 substitute rule in, but it's only you can only do it for, players who are injured or something like that. I don't know. But you can't do that. That's not feasible. So then the managers then will take advantage if say, I don't know, let's say if, I don't know, a team at random, Sheffield United are 1-0 up against one of the big 6, say they're 1-0 up against Manchester City, or something like that, and there's 20 minutes to go. Is it fair then that Pep Guardiola could, in theory, say, for example, whoever he's got on the bench, say he's got Foden on the bench, say he's got Bernardo Silva on the bench, say he's got Gundogan on the bench, say he's got Gabriel Jesus on the bench, and these are guys who are on the bench quite often. Is it fair that he can just suddenly put all 5 of them on at once?
Andy, it's not just theory. No. I was lucky enough to be at the Norwich Man City game last season, and Pep started with Kevin De Bruyne on the bench, and Norwich famously went ahead in that game, and he brought De Bruyne on, and single-handedly he virtually turned the game on its head, and Norwich just squeaked out a 3-2 win. If he brought De Bruyne on and a couple of other A-listers, he would have turned that game around, and we wouldn't have one of the great results, one of the great occasions of last season.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. It's funny, you, Andy, you raised the thing about American football. I kind of liken it to basketball, where it even feels like, you kind of got the guys on the side of the pitch, they're on, they're off, that kind of rolling
something. Yes.
Feel. And it just feels, I totally take that point, and I do. And I think we've all been at games. I remember, I think it was Brighton-Liverpool back in the last season, a night match. Liverpool had already won the title, but they still wanted to carry on winning, and they were just able to flick a switch basically with substitutes, and that feels wrong if you've not done it from the start of the season.
Exactly.
What I would say is, don't we have an issue?
Yeah.
Are we not being blind to the injury factor? If indeed we can prove, and I think it's obvious. It's so obvious that the muscle injuries are as a result of the greater stress and greater fatigue. Aren't we being blind to the safety and the welfare of the players? And isn't that just, isn't splitting hairs missing the point that we have to look after the players? Or am I being naive?
Well, no, you're not being naive. I mean, you share the concerns of Premier League managers that I don't. We're just disagreeing on that. I mean, listen, I'll always go back. I always go back. I do week in, week out, trot out the old stat about the Liverpool team that won the title in 1966.
The game's changed, though, I'd say, you see. The game's changed.
Football's changed. Has it changed that much? Yeah. Last time I saw it, certainly in 1966, there was still 11 versus 11, a football, 2 goals, centre circle, touchdowns, and the aim was to get it into each other's goals. I mean, physically it might have changed. Physically, I don't know. We don't know, dude. But in 1966, what I would tell you is the Liverpool won the league title and got to the final of the European Cup Winners' Cup and played in the FA Cup and the League Cup. Weren't so successful in those, but played in all 4 competitions. The entire campaign, they used 14 players, 4 players, not in one game, not in one half, in the entire league. Okay, the game has changed. Okay, but it's like there is. What I would say, John, I think the thing about this particular situation with the 5 sub rule, I'm against it. I think they've got big enough squads to rotate. Luke Shaw gets injured for Manchester United, and people are straight away saying, well, it's the demands and how much he's playing. Well, I'll tell you what, you've got Brandon Williams there. Play him. You've got other options there. You've got these teams have a cast of thousands. Look at Manchester United complain about fixture congestion and whatever, but they've got players who are just not playing. They're paying 150 grand a week to Ighalo. Where is he? Where's Phil Jones? Where are these guys? Where's Jesse Lingard? They've got enough players to rotate, and that's why Liverpool will keep on winning games because the squad's strong enough. The one caveat that I would say, the one thing that probably undermines my entire argument and those who are against it, the one thing that undermines it is the fact that we are out on a limb. I mean, to excuse the pun, we are out on a limb in the sense that every other major league in Europe and internationally and in the Champions League and in the Europa League entitle you to 5 substitutions. And I just think that that is, I mean, that just stands out like a sore thumb, doesn't it? You know, we are out on. I don't know whether we anticipate or not, but we are on our own. And I do think that the regulations of football should be across the board. So the substitute rule should be across the board on all of football.
It feels crazy to me that basically you have different rules for the same club.
But hang on, gents. On that score, we've got a far better league than every other club, every other country in Europe. Which
remarkable claim there, Danny.
Well, no, because it's competitive. It's more competitive, which is what broadcasters are prepared to pay for. Which is why Premier League clubs have so much more money than. No one's saying that we should give our money away to the rest of Europe to level it up. I mean, it's all part and parcel. If you're going to have a competitive Premier League that broadcasters want to show, then you can't be having these 5 substitutes. That's why they get the big money, which gives them more chance to build squads that can cope with not having 5 substitutes.
It wasn't that competitive last year, though, was it?
You got him before me, Jez.
I'm talking about individual matches, not the actual competition.
The other thing, Crossy, is I know I said this before a few weeks ago, but I was at the Liverpool Man City game before the international break.
Yeah.
And Pep Guardiola made 1 change in that game. He had the option of making 3 changes. He made 1.
Yeah.
They were on top in the second half. They were going for the win. So, look, whether you are for or against it, we all clearly get the feeling that managers are pushing hard for the rule to be changed in the middle of a season, which I disagree with.
Yeah,
they have an argument for it, but they're not. If they were making 3 subs after an hour every game to say I'm protecting my players, they would have an argument. But when you see him making 1 or 2 changes, not even using the full allocation of 3 subs, it makes you think, well, hang on a minute. These managers are moaning about the international fixture list, and I get that because everyone's selfish in this game. But the Klopps of this world and the Guardiolas, they're picking roughly the same teams on a weekly basis and flogging their own players to death. So you can't then moan at Southgate for doing the same thing with people like Harry Kane and Harry Maguire and whoever, can you?
No, you can't. Guys, I'm going to move it on to this weekend. We've got some super games. Where should we start? I'll tell you where we'll start. We'll start in chronological order because Tottenham Man City is on Saturday tea time, really. And this intrigues me, guys, because I, for one, think that, we've got the most open Premier League for years, whether you're talking relegation battle, whether you're talking battle for Champions League or indeed the race for the title. Does that open the door for Tottenham? And indeed, if that being the case, is this a bit of an acid test for Jose Mourinho against Pep Guardiola's team? Who wants to take this? It would
have been 2 years ago because City were, they were head and shoulders above every other team. But obviously things have changed since then. They're still a wonderful side, don't get me wrong. And if I had, like Dunny always says, if you had 30, 40 quid to spend on going to watch any team in the country, you'd always pick City because they play the greatest football. That doesn't mean say they're the greatest team, though. And they have been patchy this season, He Guardiola finally thinks that he's solved his defensive problem with his new signing, and he's settling in quite well. And they are still a formidable outfit with a wonderful squad, but for some reason they don't have that fear factor that they used to do when they won the league title with that remarkable finish to the season. So it's a tough game to call. Normally you would say City probably win it 2-1, 3-1, but Tottenham have become very resilient this season under Mourinho. I think we've lost 1 in the last 14 games, so there's more substance to that team than there has been in previous years where they're flattered to deceive. I know they got to the Champions League final, but they've always been the bridesmaid and not the bride. But so, you look at that game and you think, well, I don't want to pick a winner, really. Tottenham are so hard to beat, but yet City can, if they turn it on, they can beat anyone on the day. But I tell you what, if Tottenham get a win at the weekend, you've got to seriously start taking notice of Tottenham as if to say, look, why can't they win the title, as opposed to why they can, and the reasons for them not being able to win the title are probably diminishing.
Yeah, Matt, are they title contenders?
I went quite strong on that last week. I think they're very strong title contenders. What I would say about this game is that if Pep needs to give his players any motivation, he could just play the team talk that Mourinho was giving in the dressing room ahead of this fixture last year, which was on Amazon Prime, when he went through quite some of the names he was calling those City players. I think that gives them all the motivation they need. So with that in mind,
remind us. I can't remember.
I don't think this is that sort of program.
No,
sanitize it for us.
We've got a bleep machine. No, he explained to them.
Tell us. Go on, paraphrase.
He told the Tottenham players at half time just what nasty people the Manchester City players were.
Oh, yes, he did. Yes.
Words that certainly I would never use.
The foulest words you can use.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And told them that's what Manchester City were, and they had to be the same if they wanted to compete with them. So bear in mind, if that's what he thinks of Manchester City players, they're not going to want to show him anything else but that. So if Spurs can come through this with all that history, I think it's then a more resilient Spurs than we're perhaps giving them credit for. And I think that, as Jeremy said, you then start looking at it on the other side and think, well, hang on a sec, why? They got Kane, Son, and Bale as their front three if they want it. They've got other players in reserve. They've got a World Cup winning goalkeeper. There's not a lot wrong with that first team or that squad that says that they can't at least challenge Liverpool for the title this year and be challengers, if not actually win it.
On this individual fixture, John, I think for Spurs, stay in the game early on is key to it. I think a lot is said about City's defence, not least from myself actually over the last couple of seasons, and on how costly it's been and how costly it will continue to be. However, this season, I've been to a couple of City games where the pattern has been the same, whereas basically they've been on top, and when they get into that final third, as they do very often, they're not as clinical. They're not picking the right options. They're not scoring as many goals. It's as simple as that. Where we saw it in, for example, Ellen Road when they played Leeds, and they blew Leeds off the park essentially in the first 25 minutes, but only had one goal to show for it, and in the end didn't win the game. And probably you could say they were probably the better team against Liverpool, and only scored the one goal. That ironically, with the issue with Aguero and obviously Jesus has been injured, and the likes of Sterling it doesn't look as though he's going to be as prolific as he has been in previous seasons. He may prove me wrong. The goals aren't coming as regularly from midfield as they have done in the past. And I think that if you can frustrate City early on, the first 20, first 25, first 30, then you've got a chance, as you say, with that attacking talent that Matt outlines there. Spurs have got a chance.
Yeah, Jez, I just want to have a look at another game, Liverpool-Leicester. It feels like a bit of a similar question, really, about Leicester as it was about Spurs. Are they the real deal under Brendan Rodgers? Does this kind of, does their early flourish bring back memories of 2016, 500-1? Higher, I think, actually.
Look, if Leicester went on to win the title this season, it wouldn't be anywhere close to being the same shock as it was, several years ago under Ranieri. But don't get me wrong, it still would be quite a story. But look, they're a great. They bring so much to the Premier League out of Leicester. They're wonderful to watch. They destroy teams on the break. Is it too soon to be judging them? I think it is. I was looking at the fixtures they've played this morning, and they've not had any really, really big tests. They played the one big test they had was City away, and they got demolished 5-2. So, was that an off day perhaps because the form's been very consistent? I think I've said this before. They rely too much on Vardy for goals. As wonderful as he is, the guy's in his 30s. Will he pick up injuries? Will he run out of steam towards the end of the season? I know he's a bit of a freak of nature, Jamie Vardy, but that axis with him and Maddison is crucial to their progress. They will go to Anfield full of confidence. Look, they will go there trying to win the game. They won't go there and try and get a point. Liverpool have been decimated, obviously, by injuries, and now Salah's going to be missing through COVID. So they're vulnerable at the minute, Liverpool, and it's a wonderful chance for Leicester to put down a marker.
And Andy, that City Leicester game was something else, wasn't it? I mean, Leicester absolutely fearless on the break, and Harvey Barnes was great that day, wasn't he, as well? And I mean, does Brendan Rodgers go to Anfield with the same approach?
Well, what they did that day, I was at that game, John, and what they did in that victory was again, City absolutely battered them early on. I mean, we're all over them. You could only see one outcome. And if you remember, it sort of brings back echoes of Roy Keane, because having scored City, Kyle Walker then gave away a rather needless penalty with a rather rash challenge on Jamie Vardy. And Leicester scored, and the rest, of course, is history. They won 5-2. And everything they touched turned to gold. I remember James Maddison, I think, scored a worldie late on. But anyway, it was a 5-2 that you actually, you looked at it in the same way as Villa 7, Liverpool 2. It felt like a freak result. However, what was interesting, and you say, well, will he go for it? No, what he'll do probably is exactly the same as he did at the Etihad, which is they conceded early on, Leicester, which you would have thought would have scuppered their game plans, but it didn't. They still sat back. They sat back on a 1-goal deficit. They played deep on a 1-goal deficit. You thought to yourself, well, you're going to have to come out and try and get this back, but they didn't. They were just patient. It was, I think, and then they broke away. I think it was probably about half an hour. The equaliser, and they got it, and it worked perfectly. I think in that game, again, I stand to be corrected, but I think the stats were something like 70-30 in terms of possession. I think Leicester had 30% possession and scored 5 goals. It was remarkable, and that is the sort of thing that he'll be doing at Anfield. Listen, he won't be going gung-go at Anfield, even though. If you think Liverpool are without defensively, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Joe Gomez, obviously Virgil van Dijk, they are stretched there. Fabinho's not going to be available. They are stretched, but still, he will just Rodgers will go. He'll go with basically what he did at City, which was like a bank of 4 and 5. Vardy up top, looking for the break, and seeing if they can get something that way.
Matt, you've obviously said that Tottenham are going to win the title by an absolute streak.
Yeah.
So unless they're going to be their closest, challengers.
A bit of quotes improvement there, I think.
Bit of gravy.
No, Leicester won't be the closest challengers. I think it's remarkable that they're contending again. You probably wouldn't see it this way, but I think Brendan Rodgers has got a lot to do with it, Crossy. I know you're not a very big fan of Brendan Rodgers.
Let's just make this clear. I'm his number one fan. I'm secretary, founder member, chair of the fan club.
I was going to say, you hardly ever mention it, to be fair. But no, it's remarkable that they're close, but for all the limitations they've got, they're a great counter-attacking side against the big clubs, and they remarkable achievement in getting results. And also, having seen them with that 9-0 at Southampton, you realise that they can be relentless when they've got the taste for it, and can play some pretty amazing football when they want to. But that said, the strength and depth issue is going to hold them back, and it's going to be it's going to be Liverpool, City, and Spurs, I think, in the mix-up for that top 3 places. With Leicester, must see it as a success if they can finish in the top 4.
You don't see United?
No, not over the course of the season. I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer gets too many things wrong, and there's too many liabilities in his defence still. They can't contend for the title. I mean, they've got it. They also should be beating Leicester to a top 4 position with their what they've got available. But no, I don't see them challenging for the title yet. No.
Crossy, can I just ask you, if you were Ed Woodward and you were thinking of replacing Solskjaer, would you go for Rodgers? Would he be on your shortlist?
Well, I feel he should be, but I think that you've always got this obstacle to overcome to appoint a former Liverpool manager, because whichever way you look at it, you could argue that basically, slightly different, replacing a sort of kind of almost a Liverpool legend, isn't it? Basically, and Brendan Rodgers, I think, did an incredible job to take them within an inch of the title that season. But I just feel that basically now in any big club, because of style, because of the way that he plays and the brand of football and his progressive and his coaching ability, I think he should be in the frame for any major job. But I just think because of that Liverpool-Man United connection, it would probably make, not top of your list. Whereas I think other clubs would probably make him top of the list. I think Pochettino, who basically is a year out, it's a year on, isn't it, today? I mean, it feels like there's so much love for Pochettino, and please don't get me wrong, I'm one of these guys that buys into it. It feels like this is kind of, we should have some sort of ceremony today to mark the passing of a year, without Pochettino in our lives. The love is so great amongst newspaper reporters, against social media, against sort of online. Absolutely everyone loves Poch and he's fantastic, and maybe we should all try and get over to Argentina and have some sort of some sort of thing outside his house. Please come back, Poch. I miss you so much. I mean, it's getting. I looked at it this morning. It's out of hand. Mirror Football, our lovable website and Twitter feed, has already posted about 27 tweets by the time we started the show saying, please come join us. Pochettino, we miss you so much. I mean, it's just, I just think I do think that Pochettino is maybe an easier fit for United.
If it's too difficult to get the United job, then for Brendan, he'll just have to settle for being the next England manager, won't he, after Southgate?
Yeah, of course. Yes, absolutely. Or Real Madrid, perhaps.
Yeah. I think it's just or both.
Well, absolutely. Part-time, he's that good.
Just a quick one on that. I guess there's a difference between taking a former Liverpool manager and, a former Liverpool manager who might be a bit embittered by how he...
Yeah. He's got maybe a point to prove. No, that's a fair point. That is a fair point. I don't know. Going back to the original point, is Solskjaer... do we think that Solskjaer is going to finish the season at United? That's the point. What do we think?
I don't personally. I just think they're so inconsistent with results. You can't keep. Look, he has this unnerving ability to get a big win when he needs one. He got one at Everton before the international break when everyone was saying lose there and that's it, mate. You're going to get the bullet. Look, that's all well and good. But the job of a Manchester United manager is not just to survive, like what Solskjaer is currently doing and has been doing for probably a year. It's not just to survive with the odd great result. It's to thrive and show progression and show that you're building a team that's going to go on and challenge for the title. And they're still so far off the title challenge, United. That's the long term. If I was Ed Woodward, I'd be looking at it and thinking, okay, he's been in charge for a long time now, really, and we've not seen enough progress to justify us keeping him.
It's funny to just in the here and now, if we're looking ahead to the weekend's fixtures, I mean, that one is Manchester United versus West Bromwich Albion on Saturday night. It's just like, in many ways, it's possibly the worst possible fixture for Solskjaer to have, because, listen, they've got to win that game. That game, bear in mind their home Premier League form has been little short of disastrous this season. If he loses at home to West Brom, I mean, that in itself, would be...
Have you seen West Brom?
Yeah, I have seen West Brom.
Yeah. Please don't get me wrong. Slaven Bilic isn't far off. Isn't far off my being in my wonderful managers who absolutely love and adore.
Great managers.
I just feel he's not being backed. I feel really sorry for him. I did, West Brom. I understand the difficulties for a newly promoted club in a pandemic, but I just think that basically they've been so good.
I agree.
I can't see it.
I agree to 6 extent. Mind you, I did see them against at Chelsea at the Hawthorn. So which for the first half was quite sensational. No, but you know what I'm saying about United is they haven't been beaten at home by Crystal Palace, haven't been beaten at home by even more surprisingly probably Arsenal. Well, that's true. But their record against Big Six teams away from home, that was their first win at a Big Six team, I don't know, since time immemorial. But I do think that's a game, the sort of one-off game. If Solskjaer loses games sort of closely against big teams, then, he's still... But if they went to beat West Brom on Saturday night, then all of a sudden, straight away, and you're going to have this all season. That's what Jeremy's saying. You can't just be having the odd good result, and then all of a sudden you're back into a situation where everyone's saying, should Ole go when they get beat home to Palace or whatever the poor result is they get at home. So it's he needs a convincing win on Saturday night and a couple on the spin to ease it. But everyone you hear, there's been another recent statement from Woodward saying they are quite happy with the direction that Ole's taking them in.
Yeah, I just before we finish on a bit of fun, I just want to touch on the kind of one other serious issue, which is a topic again this week about the fans back in stadiums. I mean, guys, we all miss fans so much, and I don't, it's so easy to sound blasé when you say that, but they're the heartbeat of football, basically, on and off the pitch. Football is not the same without them. Having said that, can we justify kind of talk of crowd experiments next month, when the debate on the front pages is having, gatherings at Christmas of 10 people could put back, restrictions or end up extending restrictions for another 5 weeks? Can we morally justify it? And when I say that, I mean, the safety of the fans as well.
Well, no, I mean, it's a simple answer, John. It is that sort of juxtaposition of, Boris Johnson saying, I want to get sports stadiums open. Oliver Dowden, I think, is doing the rounds probably as we speak of the electronic media, probably saying the same thing. And as you say, you read this story that, well, if we have, 4 days of Christmas of relative normality, we need to pay it back with a month of lockdown. And, there comes a time, listen, we all want fans back. It goes without saying, and clubs are desperate for them to be back. Lower league clubs are desperate for them to be back purely for financial reasons, if nothing else. But it's just incongruous to have this idea that the country is going to be on even stricter lockdown, yet you're trying to get, 5,000 people back into Anfield or wherever, Goodison Park or Old Trafford. It just, as I say, it just jars, basically, doesn't it? It's as simple as that.
I think it's inappropriate.
I'm not saying it's not safe
about it because, you look at it's been another grim week in it for the death toll, which is rising steadily again. I mean, it's up over 500 people a day now again, which is heading towards the figures in April and May. And I just find it really tasteless that we're talking about or reading or writing or thinking about, getting 1,000 fans back in certain tiered places of the country when all these families are just having their lives ripped apart.
Absolutely, I think we can have a debate about it. But when I see politicians, sometimes I feel like they're trying to score a cheap points win. We're talking about getting fans back in. That's what upsets me, because I don't think the reality is that we can talk about relating to tiers system. But I don't know whether that's fair.
I mean, it's interesting what would be the reaction. Clubs are obviously desperate to get fans back in.
Of course.
I actually, I just don't know. I wonder if right now, in the current climate, in the current situation with the current restrictions, I wonder if fans are desperate to get back in. It's an interesting study. Now, listen, I'm not comparing us to what's happening there, but there was an interesting study in the States this week, which suggested that something like 40% of regular fans who attend sporting matches, whether it be basketball, baseball, American football, 40% of fans who regularly attended pre-COVID would not attend again until a vaccine is found and has been distributed and everyone's had the vaccine. It's a very interesting point. Is we say as though it's a given, the fans can't wait to get back into stadium, but while the pandemic is still out there, and while, as Jeremy says, 500 people are dying per day, it'll be interesting to see whether or not they actually want to come back. One thing, I'll be very brief. One thing is for sure, though, we just can't go from 0 fans to 72,000 inside Old Trafford. We can't suddenly flick a switch one day and say, right, come on, lads, everyone and girls, everyone get back, 72,000 inside Old Trafford, queue for your pies here, get a beer and whatever, mill around in the concourses. It's going to have to be structured. It's going to have to start with staggered, 10%, 20%, and staggered up till that, and that's going to be a long time. I mean, could any of us actually even now sort of sit here and envisage the time when we are going to be in the stadium with 72,000 other people? It's very, very hard to actually envisage that time, isn't it?
No, it's interesting, because there was some rugby league. There's a big rugby league series on State of Origin. It was the deciding game actually between New South Wales and Queensland in Sydney on Wednesday morning. With 50,000 people in that stadium. You just saw it, and it looked really odd to see virtually a full stadium. And then you started thinking, well, clearly that's a country which has had similar circumstances to the rest of the world. Their government's clearly handled it far better than our government has. And they're in a far more advanced position and safer position having sporting events, but with large crowds back in. And while it was great to see, it was also depressing to see because you thought back to what our circumstances are and you think, God, it's going to be ages before you see a full stadium again.
Yeah, no, that's shocking. I hadn't seen that. That's amazing, actually.
Yeah,
to be honest,
Rugby
the
league.
very notion of it.
League,
yeah. Well, what is that?
It's played with a different ball, John. It's a proper game played by proper men.
I'm only joking, guys. Just to finish, I love the book chat last week, so I'm going to go around the virtual room, if I may. And a subject. It's been England week, international week. So we miss trips so much, don't we? Really, there's very limited countries. We still will go where it's possible, but very limited trips where we can go. So I want to go around the virtual room, please, and ask you to recall your favourite England trip, please, and reasons why. Andy, I'll start with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go for, obviously, we've all got loads and loads of these, whether it be tournaments, etc. But for the one-off trip, I mean, I can't go any further than Munich 2001, September 2001, and the 5-1 win. Only because, that day, I was walking in the afternoon on the streets of Munich with Steve Howard. And Steve Howard says to me, he used to work for the Sun and obviously retired now. And we passed a tobacconist's and he said, come on, let's go in here. I said, what for? He said, I'm going to buy 2 of their finest cigars. So he showed them into the humidor and I said, what are you buying these for? He says, when England score their 5th tonight, I'm going to light one up in the press box. And I'm just like, what? What? So sure enough, I'll fast forward it to when the 5th went in. And there was Lord Howard sparking up this huge cigar, passing it to me. Classic. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget. And just a moment that stayed with me. I remember Sven actually, I think, I certainly wasn't one of them, but I think he got applauded into the press conference, something that we always frown at when foreign journalists do it. We absolutely can't stand it. And then we went out and it was a restaurant in Munich, a bar called, I think it was called Cafe Roma. And needless to say, the night went on and on and on, and I'm not sure everyone made their flight the next morning. It was just a great night. For enough, Jamie Carragher in his new book goes through some old games, and he actually goes through that particular game. And it turns out we didn't play great. I can't remember. I mean, it turns out that it was not a lucky 5-1, but basically everything that could go right went right. So I remember that because I remember Germany missing all sorts of chances, and then of course Gerrard scored just before half time. So I'll go for that. That's that out of them all. That as a one-off was just a great night.
Yeah, fantastic. Jezza?
Well, I've got a couple of trips really. Obviously, we all remember the World Cup in Russia for obvious reasons. But the standout moment of that trip for me was when we beat Colombia on penalties. So I don't know if you remember, but when Yerry Mina equalised in the last minute, all the Colombian journalists were up, jumping around, slamming their fists on the desk, thinking they're going to win. We were thinking, oh no, here we go, extra time, penalties, we're going to lose. Absolute nightmare. I don't know. I've never been as wound up in a press box. You obviously try and remain neutral, don't you? I've never wanted England to win as much, especially when we went to penalties. And obviously, we won the penalty shootout. There was that famous footage of Southgate going up over to the fans and sort of really releasing all his emotions. Yeah. Obviously, first penalty shootout win in years and years, or a knockout win, actually, since 2006, I think it is. So it was a real seminal moment. And that I always remember that one. From all those, that was a great trip to Russia. But from a personal point of view, my favourite trip was Brazil, although on the flip side, England were absolutely shocking that World Cup in 2014. But I had some great times on Copacabana Beach.
Matt?
Well, my standout trip, the trip like no others I've ever been on with England or anyone, has to be the 2006 World Cup, when I followed events from a caravan.
The caravan of love.
It was. I was dubbed Carafan by my editor of the day. Put in the world's smallest caravan. Got the ferry from Hull to Rotterdam. Bumped into Paul Robinson's family on the ferry and ended up playing bingo with them. the advantage was I could fit a set of golf clubs in the back. So on off days, I was tended to find campsites right next to golf courses somehow.
Working hard, yeah.
That was on the off day, the old off days. I didn't get many off days, although England had the decency to go out nice and early again against Portugal. So day after that, I got a game, which was good. But then, parking literally next to the stadium in Stuttgart for the Ecuador game, which was the best commute for a match day. And then having been stuck in some backward places doing training camps during the World Cup, finally sort of people recognizing me as I drove out at one campsite where I'd been for 3 or 4 days. And it was nice. All the locals were waving to me. They I thought, I've made a bit of an impression here. And so I started waving back before they started waving more frantically. And I'd realised I'd left my electric lead plugged in and I was training a 50-yard lead. And they were worried I was going to kill somebody. But yes, that was the weirdest trip I've ever been on. And as time goes by, I've thought of it a lot more fondly than perhaps I did at the time.
I know. Just ironically, Matt, there's another podcast out there somewhere where I talk about, I relive the Baden-Baden. In contrast, I was staying in the same hotel as the Wags, the luxury hotel Baden-Baden in Brenner's Park. And that was one of the most surreal experiences, but we haven't got time here. But while you were in your caravan, we were in the luxury having cocktails with Posh Spice and Cheryl Cole and I was playing golf with Jamie Carragher's dad because the Carraghers were staying in a bed and breakfast down the road, the House of Scouts as we used to call it. And I remember playing on a posh golf course with Jamie Carragher's dad, and it started raining. We were playing in skins with no tops on, and it was just one of the most surreal experiences out there in Baden-Baden. But anyway, your caravan sounds good as well, mate.
Like I say, with time, I think of it more fondly. Yeah. When I kept pumping into you guys at press conferences and hearing your stories and going back to my beans on toast, it wasn't quite so good.
Tins of Frankfurters.
JC?
Well, I judge every England jaunt really by the England press team really. So, the miracle of Warsaw when we somehow managed to scrape in the glory days of playing the England press team playing, somehow managed to scrape a 1-1 draw, and then basically also in Kazakhstan when comically the press game was broadcast live on local TV, and had a classic moment of a ball being chipped into the England press team penalty box, and I was in goal. And basically came out for the ball, didn't really call for it, nor did Henry Winter. Henry then heads it, and the commentary went along the lines of cross, Winter, cross. And the ball, unfortunately, rather comically ended up in the net with Nigel getting there. So you got to be able to laugh at yourselves, really. No, that's an amazing trips, really, sort of down the years with England, and I do think without a shadow of a doubt, the best experience I've had with England was 2018 World Cup, really.
Yeah,
and I do think it makes you think sometimes. I think the last week or so we've seen a little bit of criticism of Gareth Southgate. Not much, I have to say. I rail against the idea that the tide has turned. I don't believe that for a second, but it does make you think. Blimey, just look at where we've been in the past and where we come to. So you'll find me staunchly behind Gareth Southgate.
Yeah, I remember the darts being a particular highlight, Crossy.
Yes. Not least because he introduced darts, which led to my humiliation of not managing to get a single dart when I was playing John Stones.
That was John Stones' last great triumph, wasn't it?
He hit the board once.
Thank God he won on live TV.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Harry Kane winner, remember that?
Yeah, it was like we quickly merged into Gary Cahill interview afterwards, and Gary Cahill just. Basically, I think kicked off the interview by sort of saying to me, "Did I hear right? You not even hit the board." It was great.
The level, the table tennis standard was high, though, wasn't it? Oh.
Table tennis, yeah, absolutely. We had to call it me. I played Charlie Sale, the legendary diarist of the Daily Mail. Believe you me, if they'd allowed it, we'd still be going on now.
Still the same rally,
2.5 years
Federer
later,
Nadal at
we had to
Wimbledon.
call it quits in our 30s because neither could find a two shot winning margin. It was comical. Anyway, guys, I've taken up enough of everyone's time, really. Self-indulgent sporting memories, really. But guys, no, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Been a really interesting couple of weeks to look back upon internationally, and also look forward to this weekend. Guys, Andy, Jeremy, Matt, thanks so much for your company. Really enjoyed it. Hope you've all enjoyed it as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you at the same time, same place next week.